ABC News, straightforward.
I'd like to sign this bill. This is a very different thing. And by the way, what's happened to our country and what you now see, it's been happening, is the greatest thing that can happen for race relations, for the African American community, for the Asian American, for the Hispanic American community, for women, for everything.
What's your plan?
Because our country is so strong. And that's what my plan is.
President Trump invoking the name of George Floyd while taking an economic victory lap, saying the new job numbers make it a great day for the country and for Floyd, who is, of course, deceased. Police under scrutiny, the violent confrontation between an officer in riot gear and a 75-year-old man shoving him to the ground. New York's governor condemning the actions, while dozens of other officers are resigning from the emergency response team in protest. In Washington state, another instance of an African-American man dying in police custody, telling officers he can't breathe, and the Minneapolis Police Department instituting new rules as the calls for reform grow. Coronavirus concerns. A new CDC forecast predicts thousands of hospitalizations every day. At least 18 states now experiencing spikes in cases. Black and Blue. Our conversations with black police officers on the beat, the struggles they've faced during this unrest while on the job. Cristobal. Where will it go? When will it hit? And how strong will it be? Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Today would have been the 27th birthday of Breonna Taylor. She is the unarmed black woman who police fatally shot in her own home during a search back in March. Hers is just one on a long list of names that include George Floyd, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, and most recently, Manuel Ellis. And that is why they march. Massive protests, as you can see by these live images, continue in many parts of the nation after the killing of George Floyd. And while there have been some signs of changes and instances of reform, we continue to see violent clashes between police and demonstrators, including this incident that got our attention in Buffalo. You may have seen the video. Two officers shove a 75-year-old man to the ground and leave him bleeding on the pavement. The man remains motionless as several officers walk by before one ultimately radios for an ambulance. Those officers have now been suspended but are still getting support from colleagues and their police union. ABC's Alex Perez brings us a closer look at these kinds of incidents which keep happening all across the country.
Tonight, growing outrage over this disturbing video showing two police officers in Buffalo, New York last night shoving a 75-year-old protester to the ground, the man laying motionless. Bleeding from his ear, someone frantically calling for help. A group of officers walking right past the man to grab another protester. The city at first saying the man tripped and fell, but after the video surfaced, those two officers suspended. But tonight, the union says 57 members of that emergency response team have resigned from that squad in protest of those suspensions, though they remain on the force. As for that protester, Martin Gugino, he's in serious but stable condition. Governor Cuomo speaking with him by phone.
It disturbs your basic sense of decency and humanity. Why? And where was the threat? Who are we? How did we get to this place?
The governor pointing out police have been targeted too, like this officer struck in the head with a brick. Police say it's why this officer then pulled out his gun. Over 11 days of protests across the country, hundreds of police injured, at least 5 shot during clashes with protesters. Still, every day a test for officers, aggressive tactics under the microscope. Police in LA investigating this video, showing officers allegedly firing rubber bullets at a group of teens out after curfew. And tonight, incidents before George Floyd's death now under investigation. In Sarasota, this officer on leave after these images surfaced showing him kneeling on a man's neck in May. And in Tacoma, Washington, police investigating this video posted on Facebook showing the violent takedown of Manuel Ellis back in March. His death now now ruled a homicide. The 33-year-old reportedly yelling at one point, "I can't breathe," before police say they tried to help him and called medics.
We want answers. No more talk.
And the officers who committed this crime should be fired and prosecuted.
Alex Perez joins us now with more. Alex, let's go back to the Floyd case, which you've been covering since that video was first released. Minneapolis authorities today banned chokeholds, but the new rules also put the onus back on police.
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. You know, the mayor here and city officials here saying they want to do whatever they can to prevent something like this from ever happening again. So this new ban also requires police officers to report their colleagues. If they don't report their colleagues, they risk being disciplined as if they themselves committed the act. Lindsay?
And also on Monday, Derek Chauvin is expected to be back in court. What do we know about that hearing and what that entails?
Yeah, Lindsay, so many people curious about how this is going to play out in court. Derek Chauvin is due in court for his very first court appearance on Monday. Perhaps on Monday, we will learn what will be the defense argument as this case moves forward, Lindsay.
It'll be interesting to hear that. All right, Alex Perez live in Minneapolis. Thanks so much, Alex. And we turn now to the George Floyd death investigation. Those 4 former police officers at the scene have now been charged and jailed. Leading the prosecution is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. He joins us now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
A few hours ago, the Minneapolis City Council voted unanimously to ban the police use chokeholds and neck restraints. Should chokeholds have been banned from the start? And why has it been so difficult to make changes until a moment like this? It seems like this change has happened overnight, but it took basically the city being on fire for it to happen.
Well, I'm glad that the City Council stepped forward and took the action. I think it will be to the benefit of everybody in the city. And I think it'll be particularly welcome change by members of minority communities, including the Black community. And so it's a welcome change.
But why do you think it took so long? Why did it take for this to happen, for that change to come?
You know, I'd only be speculating, but I think it would have something to do with the strength and the influence of the Police Federation.
And do you think that a ban like this could have prevented George Floyd's death? Would it prevent possibly others?
It certainly seems so. It's difficult to speculate, but when you look at what happened, I think that there's evidence to indicate that what happened that was certainly something that could have been avoided.
You've said before that Minnesota and the country has, quote, under-prosecuted police brutality. Do you think that that'll change after this outcry?
I certainly hope so. I believe in equal justice under the law. Nobody's above the law. Nobody's beneath the law. You know, George Floyd is not beneath the law. He gets the full protection of the law just like anyone else. And nobody, no matter what their profession may be, should be allowed to do things that the law prohibits, but custom allows.
Lawyers for 2 of the charged officers argued in court that their clients were just rookies. Thomas Lane's attorney asked what was he supposed to do but follow his training officer, who was, of course, Derek Chauvin. Are you concerned that following a chain of command and their lack of experience could be a winning argument for jurors?
Well, you know, I would say that Minnesota statutes says that you cannot aid and abet a crime. There's no exception for age, and the fact is that everybody on that scene had gone through the academy, gone through training, and had been exposed to departmental policy. So I guess I'm not seeing it that way.
Would you at all consider offering any of these men plea deals, perhaps for the rookie officers, in exchange for testimony against Chauvin?
Far too early to talk about that. Certainly not publicly on television.
Okay, so many criminal cases look different after all the facts are uncovered. That can happen even when there's video evidence. Do you anticipate any surprises in this case, or do you think that that horrific video speaks for itself and tells the entire story?
Well, what I would say is if you look at videos involving deadly force encounters with the police, I think that there have been a number of cases where the video is shocking, shocked the conscience of the nation, and yet the outcome wasn't what we expected. What comes to mind is the Walter Scott video, the Rodney King video, the Freddie Gray video, other video that people thought that this matter is going to be very clear, but yet it didn't turn out that way. And so what I would say is we need to build a strong case, and video is the one piece of evidence.
Tens of thousands of Americans, as you know, are in the streets daily calling for justice for George Floyd. And you are, of course, the person who is in charge of seeing that justice is served. How much does that weigh on you? And what are the stakes, not just for Floyd and his family and these suspects, but for the entire country?
Well, I'm not feeling any kind of personal pressure. I mean, I am feeling that we are going to do everything possibly to make sure that this prosecution is successful. We believe in it. We would never have charged it out if we didn't. And we're going to put everything we have, and then ultimately a jury will decide what happens if it goes to a jury trial. So, you know, I'm just not going to worry about those side issues pressure on me. I'm putting all the pressure that I need to on myself to get victory, and I'm not motivated by public pressure. I'm motivated by justice for the victim in this case, Mr. George Floyd.
Thank you for your time, Attorney General. We appreciate it. And now to Washington, where President Trump today was celebrating surprisingly good news on the economy. Unemployment fell to 13.3% in May, and the economy added 2.5 million jobs. But it comes as protesters continue in the nation's capital and across the country, and as the D.C. mayor made a bold move on the streets outside of the White House. ABC News Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest.
The painting began before dawn. By the time the sun rose, the message stretched to Lafayette Park in front of the White House. Black Lives Matter. This is the mayor of Washington named the area Black Lives Matter Plaza, a reaction to the forceful removal of peaceful protesters to make way for the president's photo op on Monday. At the White House, the president focused on something else, the surprisingly promising economic news. Unemployment, expected to go up, actually went down, as some 2.5 million jobs were added during the month of May.
What we're announcing today is a tremendous tribute to equality. We're bringing our jobs back.
But today's good news on jobs did not extend to African Americans. Their unemployment numbers actually went up slightly. Still, the president bizarrely said this was a great day for George Floyd.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying there's a great thing that's happening for our country. There's a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
In his rambling 50-minute speech, the president did briefly talk about equal justice.
Equal justice under the law must mean that every American receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment.
But as he paused to sign a bill, he refused to answer questions.
President, why haven't you laid out a plan to address systemic racism?
I'd like to sign this bill. This is a very different thing.
What's your plan?
Because our country is so strong, and that's what my plan is. We're going to have the strongest economy in the world.
And when it was all over, he again refused to answer questions.
How can it be a great day for George Floyd? How is this a great day for equality?
Joe Biden called the president's words despicable.
George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe," have echoed all across this nation and, quite frankly, around the world. For the president to try to put any other words in the mouths of George Floyd, I frankly think is despicable.
And Jonathan Karl joins us now. John, you said that the president didn't take any questions, but he seemed more than happy to talk about the positive economic news.
He more than happy. He went on in a rather rambling press conference for some 50 minutes, but twice when there was an opportunity for reporters to ask questions, he simply refused to, walking out as people were asking some of the very obvious questions, including how could you say that this would be a great day for George Floyd?
And we also saw the president once again wade into the NFL debate on kneeling. What did he have to say? And are you surprised that he's going back to this, given the protests raging right outside of the White House gates?
You know, it may be surprising for just about anybody else, but not for Donald Trump. What he has done here now is weighing in on the controversy with Drew Brees, the New Orleans Saints quarterback, saying that he would not kneel. Brees ended up, of course, apologizing for saying that, and the president came out and said that Brees should have never apologized. He should have stuck with his original controversial statement. Lindsay?
Jonathan Karl from the White House. Thanks so much, John. And for more now on the government's response to George Floyd's death and the nationwide protest, we're joined now by longtime California Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. I'm delighted to be with you.
President Trump said today is a, quote, great day for George Floyd and for all Americans because the economy is improving. But the Floyd family and many Americans are still grieving and calling for change. So what did you make of the president's comments today and also his response this week to the nationwide protests?
Well, let me just say this. I don't even know why we repeat what the president says. He's known to be a liar. He's known to be someone that can't be trusted. And so the president might roll out tweeting or roll out in a press opportunity and say anything. He's not believable. Yes, we still have protesters in the street. We have people who are not only concerned about an inadequate overall response to the pandemic, uncertainty, not knowing what their futures hold for them. And in addition to that, we have the police who have been shown, literally draining the life out of a black man on the sidewalk with his knee on his neck. And so it's all coming together with young people saying, enough is enough. We want more from our government. We want more protection from the so-called leaders in this country. This president has been absolute disaster. And so the fact that he's rolling out, whether it's with the Bible or he's talking about, sicking vicious dogs on us, or he's talking about turning the military on us, enough is enough. Stop it, Mr. President. Nobody believes what you're saying, and I wish the press wouldn't even repeat him.
Of course, you're from California, which has seen major protests this week, and you've been calling for reforms to policing for decades, including in the aftermath of the LA riots. Is there anything at all to you about this moment that feels different, or are you at all concerned that this may fade away without any major changes, as has happened so many times before?
Yes, well, I am so proud of all of these young people. I'm so proud of the various cultures and ethnicities that are depicted in these protests, because I see a real coming together of particularly young people around the world, not only in the United States of America and all of our great states. And yes, this seems a bit different. We have been fighting this issue for many, many years. The Justice Department has not been kind to Black people, to people of color. And we are watching our sons mostly, and our daughters too, be shot down and killed, and we've not been able to protect them. So a lot of the young people are now standing up for themselves and saying, we're going to provide this leadership. We're going to challenge, the establishment that will allow people to continue to be killed in this way. Something is wrong with the ongoing, consistent racism and discrimination that this country has endured for so long. And so I'm so proud of these young people, and all I can say is keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And it's not as if you're finished. You're not finished, because actually establishment does not listen to you until you make them stand up and understand that you mean business. And so it's not going to go, it's not over, and it will go on, and I applaud that.
Let me ask you this. So Congress can't even agree to pass anti-lynching legislation. And I guess this really is a rhetorical question, but how is it 2020 and lynching has not been outlawed? Given that we can't get agreement on that, how likely is it that there's going to be agreement on more systemic changes to policing and racial justice issues and I guess at either the state or federal level? And are there any specific measures that you think could pass right now?
Well, let me just say you're absolutely correct. The chances are certainly possible that none of this will be able to pass. The Black Caucus is going to lead with a package of legislation, which includes no more chokeholds, which includes trying to limit the use of force, and on and on and on. But it may not pass. But I want to tell you that is going to help us to get rid of this president and to elect someone who certainly is more honorable.
Also want to offer my condolences because I know that you lost your sister recently to COVID-19. And as you've seen these protests with so many Americans out in the streets, how concerned are you about the spike of the virus potentially in the coming weeks?
Well, I tell you what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the young people who have had the courage to hit the streets, and I'm worried about social distancing. I don't want them to be ill. I don't want them to get sick. And that's what I'm worried about more than anything else. These brave, courageous young people who have decided they were going to put their lives on the line, not only the possibility of being infected by the coronavirus, but by, the military being turned on them and being sprayed with tear gas and the president's threat of sick and vicious dogs on them. They've been courageous. I'm worried about them.
As you know, Black Americans have died of the coronavirus at 3 times the rate of white Americans. What measures are you pushing to respond to that disparity?
Well, we're doing everything that we can. Again, this is the result of the President of the United States who's playing politics with the distribution of PPE. As you know, he has commandeered PPE that's coming from other countries and different places so that he could be in control of them. He's decided what governors and what states he wants to give them to, and it looks as if he's favoring the so-called Republican-led states. So when you ask me what are we doing, let me assure you that we are fighting every day, and it's like climbing a tall mountain, making a little bit of progress here and there, but not being able to achieve in the way that people should expect their government to achieve in a democracy. Our democracy is being undermined by the President of the United States, who cares less about the Constitution, less about religion, and flaunts the Bible, sprays protesters. And so if I sound a little bit passionate about my feelings about him, you're right.
Congresswoman, I hate to interrupt you. We're just going to run out of time. We so appreciate your passion and your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for listening for the time that you did.
As we mentioned earlier, good news for the job market. The U.S. economy added 2.5 million jobs last month, way above expectations. The unemployment rate also fell to 13.3%. So let's bring in ABC's Rebecca Jarvis to break down those numbers. Rebecca, while this is good news, most of the gains came from people who were furloughed and are now going back full time. But the number of people permanently laid off, that continues to rise. So what does all of this mean?
Well, that's right, Lindsay. So what we saw is that 2.7 million individuals who were temporarily laid off went back to work, but we also saw the number of individuals who were permanently laid off increase in the month of May by 300,000 to 2.3 million Americans. The bottom line here, when you look at this report, is that the rehiring in this economy started much sooner than most economists had forecast. In fact, every economist got this one wrong and expected that we would see a gigantic number of job losses again in the month of May. The key question here is, with unemployment now at 13.3%, which is still a highly elevated level, there are millions of Americans that are out of work right now. And you go back to January of this year when it was 3.5%. You could even go back to the worst of the Great Recession and unemployment was 10%. So we're still at these highly elevated levels. And the key question now is, how much is this sustained? How much of the rehiring takes place in the next few months as job reopenings or as states reopen and jobs get rehired? And which areas does the rehiring really take hold? We saw it mostly across the board here, but still at the state government level, we saw significant decreases in employment. And you look at what states are going through right now, managing through the COVID crisis and the financial damage that exists at so many state government levels. It's truly something that many states will be digging out of for many years to come.
And would you say that this report means that another stimulus bill is less likely to happen? And without it, then how much longer will it take for the job market to get back to where it was before the pandemic?
Well, it certainly decreases the urgency to see the turnaround taking shape earlier than anyone was anticipating. Decreases the urgency, but it appears that the White House and Democrats are still to some degree on board with some form of stimulus. I think the key question here is, what form does the stimulus take? The White House has been more on the side of payroll tax cuts and potentially more stimulus checks, whereas Democrats have been on the side of those stimulus checks, but also looking at state governments, looking at areas that have been damaged by this crisis and finding ways to invest in those areas going forward. Look, I think one thing is really important to keep in mind here, and that is how our country has behaved coming out of recessions has been frequently, and over the last 3 recessions, jobless recoveries. It's language you probably heard and you probably recall from the Great Recession. What tends to happen is that while some of the jobs come back, not all of the jobs come back as companies learn to do more with less. And that could be a really significant question as we lead into an election year and unemployment is so significant in terms of where it is today versus where it was just 4 months ago.
Rebecca Jarvis, thank you so much as always. And we continue to monitor the protests across the country. Here in New York, protesters are once again out in defiance of the 8 p.m. curfew. This is a live look at protesters who were just marching through downtown Brooklyn. They seem to have stopped for the moment, but so far from what we've seen, things are peaceful. Meanwhile, we're now learning that 2 NYPD officers have been suspended without pay after violent interactions with protesters last weekend. In addition, a supervisor who was on the scene will be transferred. In Seattle tonight, the mayor has agreed to ban police use of tear gas, at least temporarily. The 30-day ban takes effect right away, and it's a major change from the scenes that we've been showing you all week in Seattle. Rubber bullets and pepper spray have not been banned. During that time, an oversight panel will be reviewing how the department uses tear gas. A report last night detailed how non-lethal weapons such as tear gas and pepper spray could actually make you more susceptible to
place with the good information you need.
We are all in this.
What you need to know. Afternoons at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC.
Welcome back. A group of NFL stars put together a powerful video trying to send a message to the NFL and the rest of the country after the killing of George Floyd. Here they are in their own words.
I am George Floyd.
I am Breonna Taylor.
I am Ahmaud Arbery.
I am Eric Garner.
I am McCormick Dunn.
I am Tamir Rice.
I am Trayvon Martin.
I am Walter Scott.
I am Michael Brown Jr.
I am Samuel Du Bois.
I am Frank Smart.
I'm Philip White.
I am Jordan Baker.
We will not be silenced.
We assert our right
to peacefully protest.
It shouldn't take this long to admit.
So, on behalf of the National Football League,
this is what we, the players,
would like to hear you state.
We, the National Football League,
condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people.
We, the National Football League,
admit wrong and silencing our players from peacefully protesting.
We, the National Football League,
believe Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
And the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell just released a video statement in response to that. Take a listen.
We, the National Football League, condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people. We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest.
Goodell says he will be personally reaching out to the players who have raised their concerns. He did not mention Colin Kaepernick by name. Kaepernick has been out of the NFL since after the 2016 season, when he began kneeling his demonstrations during the national anthem to put a spotlight on police brutality in America. The death of George Floyd at the hands of a white police officer has sparked outrage around the world. But for black police officers serving during this monumental period of civil unrest, it's especially complex. So we wanted to hear directly from some of those officers on how they view the nationwide protests and what drives them to serve in uniform as they grapple with the challenge of being both black and blue.
A collective public outcry for justice ringing out on America's streets this week. The tension between black and blue on full display from the front lines of protests across the country.
Their goal is to respect the Constitution, to respect
the First Amendment rights, but to also show solidarity. And I think the complexities of this is that as people of color, anyone wearing that uniform, is how do you ensure the respect of the First Amendment rights, but at the same time to ensure people's safety.
I pray we find solutions. They ain't gonna happen right now.
Absolutely.
They not gonna happen right now.
Absolutely.
But we as a community have to come together.
Absolutely.
We gotta stop this.
Absolutely.
And I understand. We gotta stop this.
For black police officers, it's a difficult balance, a tightrope to both protect and serve, while at the same time understanding the pain and anger of their own communities.
Right? I have a son who's 31. I've got a son who's 15, all right? And I have to have these conversations with them all the time. So we're not telling y'all to leave. What was going on up here was wrong. That's why we brought it to a stop. The loudspeaker, the yakking and the yapping. We said pause. Let these people remain here. Let them stay in the street. Let them express their grievances because you have a right to be pissed off.
Officer Kevin Jones from Cleveland, Ohio, fought back tears while talking with protesters.
I was very emotional as it was unfolding because I understood and I knew exactly what they were fighting for. America has the right to protest for rights. And I think as a police officer, I am there to protect that right when it's being peaceful.
Officer C.J. Barnett, a former Ohio State football star from Columbus, Ohio, says he wants the protesters heard.
I understand them. I hear them. I know they're frustrated. I know they're hurt. I'm frustrated. I'm hurt as well. We understand, what the world's going through right now, and just also explaining to them our objective, which is to allow for the message to be brought to the world, but to try and get rid of the small individual groups that are kind of trying to cause chaos.
He says becoming a police officer was a way to make positive change.
Because I wanted to police how I thought police should police. Having experiences with police, good and bad, I just thought that, if I have a problem with it, then why not, put myself in that position to where I can change that for anybody else I encounter.
Officer Terrence Jackson in Augusta, Georgia, who's dedicated 10 years of his life to the force, chronicles the struggles he says he faces every day.
I'm black and I am a police officer, so it puts me in the middle. I do everything I can to improve that relationship in my community, but it gets torn down from a video that's played on the news of these officers straddling this man, this black man. And it really touches the nerve because I'm doing everything I can to bridge that gap. But I gotta watch. I gotta watch this man die on TV. I gotta let my kids see this. And my child told me he can't trust the police. And I am the police. For 10 years, I gave my life to this profession. And I gotta watch on the news this man lose his life. I gave too much to this profession. I've been through too much in this profession to be labeled like we label. To work hard as I worked, to see it gets thrown away because of how my people are treated. But I'm going to continue to do what I do. I won't change. I won't bend. I won't break. I will continue to be a strong influence in my community. And hopefully the future will be different for my kids. But I'm working on my kids' future right now. If I can make a difference now, hopefully they won't go through the same thing that we're going through now. But I love each and every one of you. Hold the line, brothers, sisters. I back you. My black community, I back you. I deal with you. I stand with you. A difference has to come. A change has to come. But until then, I'm in the middle to bridge that gap. I will do everything I can to put the law enforcement and my community together so that we can unite as a people of America.
Certainly powerful to hear those voices. And we still have a lot more to get to here on ABC News Prime. The watches are now up, but just how bad might crystal ball be? And we continue to closely track COVID cases inside the U.S., where we're noticing a spike in cases and the sliver of good news from the original epicenter inside the U.S. But first, our tweet of the day, the president standing firm on his position that the NFL players should not kneel.
Another week in America, a country facing a new test now.
The Wuhan airport, almost no one here.
The last flight out of Rome.
This is the nursing home just outside Seattle. Dozens of people were just rushed off this cruise ship.
This is ground zero.
It is shut down.
Another ambulance just pulled out.
Now they're headed to the hospital.
Time is of the essence.
You can see the ship behind me.
This is the first time tests have been done here.
Morning, afternoon, evening, late night, 24/7. ABC News. There for you.
Thank you to the doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals,
and first responders.
Thank you to everyone keeping our supermarkets, pharmacies, gas stations running.
Thank you to all the essential workers for all that you do.
Thank you.
We thank you.
We thank you. We thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For all you do.
And with every challenge, question, concern, we'll be here for you every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Because we will
get through this together.
We move up to the vehicle. He detonates the bomb.
The heroes who stopped the killer, who held the city of Austin hostage for 19 days.
It's a tripwire.
All hands on deck.
The clues, the Home Depot video, that truck, and the agent who connected the dots.
It was exactly the vehicle that we were looking for.
Inside the investigation,
Vans made contact.
the takedown of the bomber. Now streaming on Hulu.
This is one of those stories that as you cover it for years, it just becomes more unbelievable.
911.
The truck fell on my stepson.
His son dead.
You wouldn't stand a chance.
His first wife dead.
Christina was trapped inside that bathroom.
When this guy needed money, a family member would die.
Now his daughters speak out. And was he planning on killing again?
What other reason would he have a life insurance policy out on one of his granddaughters?
It's almost impossible to believe.
The new 2020 event, tonight at 9/8 Central on ABC.
If you were at one of those protests, I would, out of an abundance of caution, assume that you are infected. One person can infect hundreds.
I do think there is a potential, unfortunately, for this to be a seeding event. In 3, 5, 7 days, go get tested, make sure you're not infected.
That was New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and CDC Director Robert Redfield warning about the dangers of COVID-19 spreading among those nationwide protests over George Floyd. And while cases are on the decline nationwide, the coronavirus threat remains. So let's take a look by the numbers. Up to 143,000 deaths could be expected in the U.S. by the end of June. That's according to forecasts compiled by the CDC. The current death toll stands just under 109,000 American lives lost. There's been an average of about 1,000 deaths a day in the U.S. since we've reached the 100,000 mark on May 27th. At least 18 states have an increasing number of new reported cases, according to the New York Times. And the CDC estimates between 2,000 to 5,000 new COVID hospitalizations are happening every day, with rates remaining highest among older people, Native Americans, African Americans, and Latinos. New York City saw a 75% jump in hospitalizations in one day this week alone. And while it's still too early to say if there's any link to the thousands of people in the streets protesting, there are real concerns about a potential spike in the coming weeks. But some good news, statewide hospitalizations and deaths are at their lowest rate since March. Globally, some 100,000 new cases are still being reported each day, according to the New York Times. That's twice as many countries are reporting a rise in new cases over the past 2 weeks as have reported declines as new global hotspots emerge, including in Latin and South America. And still ahead, the anti-chokehold bill making its way through Congress. Coming up, we speak with the daughter of Eric Gardner on her efforts to see this bill and have it make its way through. The renewed focus on the case of Breonna Taylor on what would have been her 27th birthday. But first, here are some of the trending stories on abcnews.com.
the eye wall.
This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protests.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
We know coronavirus has affected many of you.
America has changed for now. There's no question.
George, we are thinking of you, Allie, and the kids.
How are you feeling?
I feel fine, Robin. She wanted to share this message.
You know I'm feverish if I'm on television with no makeup on.
Allie is now on the Roberts family prayer chain.
So grateful that we get to do this from home.
You do know you're sideways, right?
People are finding a way to come together.
We're going to get through this
together.
Right here with you on Good Morning America.
Dozens of people were just rushed off this cruise ship.
You guys are the front lines keeping the supply chain open here.
Who lives, who dies?
The Iran hostages, the 9/11 terror attack, and now this.
This is Nightline.
Nightline, when it matters most. Late night on ABC.
Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news, and that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
Watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now.
In Minneapolis, city council members at an emergency meeting passing a proposed restraining order that would ban chokeholds used by police and require bystanding officers to intervene. It comes in the wake of George Floyd's death while in police custody.
We have to be on the precipice of change, and that there are reforms that are just generations past due.
In Buffalo, 2 officers were suspended and criminal charges are possible because of what happened in this video. The officers shove a 75-year-old protester who falls to the ground. He's seriously injured. The officers walk past. One appears to radio for help. Police initially claimed that the man tripped and fell. The governor calling it an utter disgrace.
You see that video, and it disturbs your basic sense of decency and humanity.
But tonight, the union says 57 members of that emergency response team have resigned from that squad in protest of those suspensions, though they remain on the force.
The jobs report for May showing signs the economy did better than expected as states reopened. The unemployment rate fell to 13.3%. 2.5 million jobs were added.
We'll go back to having the greatest economy anywhere in the world, nothing close. And I think we're going to have a very good upcoming few months.
Though temporary layoffs seem to be improving, permanent ones are still rising, and experts say there is likely a long road ahead.
But today's good news on jobs did not extend to African Americans. Their unemployment numbers actually went up slightly. Still, the president bizarrely said this was a great day for George Floyd.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying this is a great thing that's happening for our country. This is a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
It is long overdue to do the right thing.
Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian has resigned from the board of Reddit, posting this message to Twitter. As the husband of tennis star Serena Williams, he says he's thinking about the world in which their daughter will grow up.
I'm saying this as a father who needs to be able to answer his black daughter when she asks, "What did you do?"
Ohanian says he'll urge the board to replace him with a black candidate, going on to commit his own future stock gains to serve the black community. The move comes against a backdrop of long-standing criticism. Critics argue Reddit has long failed to prevent the posting of hateful, racist, and violent speech by some of its members.
Today is National Gun Violence Awareness Day, also known as the Wear Orange campaign. The day was inspired by Chicago teens after their 15-year-old friend, Hadia Pendleton, was killed by a stray bullet days after performing at President Obama's second inauguration in 2013.
I urge them to use their lives to give meaning to Hadia's life. I urge them to dream as big as she did.
They selected orange because it's the color hunters wear to protect themselves.
A state of emergency has been declared in Louisiana. Residents have been preparing for torrential wind and rain as Tropical Storm Cristobal takes aim at the Gulf Coast. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano is in New Orleans tracking the storm. Hey, Rob.
Hey, good evening, Lindsay. Cristobal is now back over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico, so it will strengthen as it heads this way. Already, the outer bands are actually hitting the southwest coast of Florida. You see it on the satellite picture. The track is going to bring it into the center of the Gulf tomorrow as a healthy tropical storm, and then landfall forecast for late Sunday with 60-mile-per-hour winds. That's getting closer to hurricane strength. And there are tropical storm warnings that are posted from central Louisiana all the way past Pensacola, because this is going to be a storm that has high impacts well east of center with tropical storm force winds over 200 miles east of the center. And those heavy rains that we saw in Mexico are going to come to the Gulf Coast as well. Could see over a half a foot of rain with this long as it makes landfall Sunday into Monday. Lindsay?
All right. Thanks, Rob. At a time when much of the national conversation is about the treatment of black men, we turn now to the case of a black woman, Breonna Taylor, who was killed by police in her own home during a botched investigation. Her death happened weeks before George Floyd's, touching off protests in Louisville and adding to the outrage being felt right now. Our Deborah Roberts has the latest.
Tonight demands for justice as the FBI investigate Breonna Taylor's killing at the hands of police.
Say her name! Breonna Taylor! Say her name!
Today she would have turned 27, a young EMT who had dreams of becoming a nurse.
Breonna was just full of life. She loved life. She light up a room.
For Courtney Riley, it feels personal. She turns 27 this year, too.
It's really hard. I do see myself in her. Like, people talk about, like, it could be my kids, it could be my brother, it could be me, like, literally me.
Back in March, 3 plainclothes Louisville police officers stormed Breonna's home, executing a no-knock search warrant. Family lawyers say Breonna's boyfriend, a licensed gun owner, fired a shot, fearing intruders. The officers fired 20 rounds in return, killing Breonna. Those officers have been reassigned but remain on the force. Tonight, activists vowing Breonna's name will not be forgotten.
Our thanks to Deborah Roberts. And joining us now is someone who knows the pain and emotional toll of police brutality all too well. Emerald Gardner, the daughter of Eric Gardner. Her dad was killed by a white police officer in New York City in 2014 after he said, "I can't breathe." That death sparked a nationwide movement. So appreciate you making the time to talk with us, Emerald.
Thank you for having me.
You've said that after your father died, you didn't have time to mourn, that you just went straight into telling his story. George Floyd's memorial was yesterday and the funeral is next week. What advice would you give his family as they're dealing and trying to cope during this incredibly difficult time?
First, as always, I want to give my condolences again to the family and especially the children. The main piece of advice that I want to give is to just, take care of your mental health, take care of your physical health, take care of the children, get them therapy. If it's not traditional therapy, just get them somebody to talk to, let them express their feelings. I see George Floyd's daughter, I think she's about 6, and I saw a video of her saying, "My dad changed my life," and that just, it warmed my heart that she's in a good spirit and she's not, as depressed, because she really doesn't know what's going on. Right. But she will learn as her life goes on as she gets older.
Right. Daddy changed the world, right? A new ABC News Ipsos poll found that 74% of Americans view George Floyd's death at the hands of a white police officer as a sign of underlying racial injustice. In 2014, a similar ABC News poll after the death of your father found just 43% of Americans viewed it as a sign of a broader problem. What do you think it is about this moment that's different in 2014?
I first want to say that I don't doubt that if more people stood behind the Eric Garner law back when we presented it, that George Floyd would not be dead today. If we had laws and policies in place to hold police accountable, then we would definitely see a change within police community relations. Again and again, time and time again, and in my father's situation, no justice was served, or justice was delayed. And right now, the world is on pause. There's nothing to distract anyone from the Black Lives Matter movement. So the difference between then and now is COVID-19, really, because COVID-19 has given the world a time to pause and to actually see what the real issue is. And the real issue is not Black lives. The real issue is police officers killing Black lives. So that's the difference between then and now. Now, there's nothing else to focus on, and this is the focus.
And let's talk about specific solutions for that accountability. I understand that you're pushing for legislation to ban chokeholds. That's something that Colorado is considering at this time. We've just heard Minneapolis is now saying that they are going to put that into action. What do you want to see specifically across the country? When we talk about these broad strokes of police reform, like tomorrow, what is the one thing that you want to see?
I mean, realistically, having racist police officers out of the police force would be my answer. But, you know, realistically, that's not going to be the answer. There's a long list of things that need to be done. Retraining the police officers, having cultural sensitivity training inside of the police force, you know, looking at the police officer's history. If you work at a retail store and you're handling money and you're handling people's debit cards and credit cards and sensitive information, you miscount register one time, you get a write-up. You do it again, you get fired. So I think that prior history of police officers need to come into account. You should not be policing a neighborhood that you've never been in. You should not be. Look at that Kai Gurley situation. The officer who killed him was not from that neighborhood, and he shot first. So somebody who was not doing anything but walking from one floor to the next. So accountability, police retraining, having you know, understanding the history of that police officer, and if they have a prior history of abusing Black and brown people, they should not be on the force. If they have any complaints against them, if they have any complaints of misconduct, excessive force, or anything that lies in that results in the killing, or, you know, anything that has to do with Black Americans, then they should not be on the police force at all.
Yesterday, Reverend Al Sharpton announced plans for a march on Washington on August 28th, 57 years to the day after the famous march led by Martin Luther King, where he delivered this I Have a Dream speech. And you are going to be attending this year's march. What kind of impact do you think that these marches have and the protesters have? And how does it make you feel also when you see all over the world people who are standing up and saying enough, and quite often these are not Black and brown people?
I think that it's amazing. I think that more people should stand behind, you know, the protests. I just want everybody to protest safely, and I want people to divert from the message. The message is they're out there because our loved ones are being killed. So if the police were not killing us, we would not have to protest. If we were not dying at the hands of white supremacists or police officers, we would not be outside protesting. So to end police brutality would mean to, of course, end the protesting. So we stand outside, we march, we yell, we scream, we protest, we die in, but we also need to focus on the legislation, police reform, retraining police officers, getting police officers with a prior history of assault, abuse, and excessive force out of the police force.
Emerald Garner, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time. And up next, enough. Powerful words from a Baseball Hall of Famer after the death of George Floyd. Stay with us.
Right now, how do you make sense of it all? Now, afternoons on ABC, one place with the good information you need.
We are all in this together, and we're going to get through this together.
Pandemic, what you need to know. Afternoons at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. Friday nights, 9, 8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt, True Crime, 2020. Friday nights, 9, 8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner of 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the most prestigious honor, Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news choice.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news. And that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
Watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
It has certainly been a trying week for the nation, still grappling with the fallout from the senseless death of George Floyd. As we leave you tonight, we wanted to share with you a powerful essay from our colleagues at ESPN, written by former Major League player Doug Glanville, now an analyst at ESPN, who also teaches at UConn on society, sports, and activism. Take a listen to his reflections on George Floyd, our nation's response, and his call to action.
It takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for sunlight to reach the earth. In that time, under its warm touch, the world saw George Floyd go cold under the bended knee of injustice and inhumanity.
Y'all don't gotta put y'all right. He is human, bro.
We stopped, still granted the gift to breathe, trying not to stare, but unable to look away. Then the tears flowed, and the temperature rose. The glistening streets became thoroughfares of protest until buildings burned under the recklessness of justifiable outrage and hopelessness. Nothing had changed. We had once again ignored the disinfecting power of the sun. We had silenced the voices of a people because their peaceful pleas were not made at the right time, at the right place, in the right way. We were once again told to wait. Even when Martin Luther King Jr. implored us in his letter from a Birmingham jail that wait has almost always meant never. And the face of smug indifference casted its shadow with self-serving and willful ignorance, defiantly staring into the heart of the sun until we were all blinded by the hate. Staring with eyes that could see color, but not humanity. Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Yet the sun rose again, to give us another opportunity to be enlightened, to help us see George Floyd as all of us and not just one of them. 8 minutes and 20 seconds to realize that we are still breathing when others can't. Enough time to lift a knee, enough time to say something, enough time to take a deep breath, enough time to ask why I'm calling 911. Enough time to wipe a tear. Enough time to be a teammate. Enough time to listen. Enough time to break bread. Enough time to learn from our differences. Enough time to raise a flag. Enough time to say enough. Enough. We have had enough time to change. But too many times, the light did not illuminate because we shielded our eyes from the reflection we did not want to see. We are 8 minutes and 20 seconds too late. And George Floyd is eternally non-responsive because we were non-responsive. So let's respond and make his death be our light.
Thanks to our friends at ESPN for that. And before we go tonight, the image of the day, the return of the theme park. Here's some people riding a roller coaster at Universal Studios in Orlando on its first day back open, of course, wearing masks and practicing social distancing. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and have a great night.